There are challenges within our immigration and asylum system, but they're challenges of the government's own making. They're not the fault of people seeking asylum here, and they're not the fault of migrants seeking to build a life for themselves and their families here in Ireland. We simply wouldn't function as a country without migration. We wouldn't staff our public services or our private enterprises. I think we probably all have friends, families and loved ones who've come from abroad, people who we simply couldn't imagine life without. Our communities and our lives would be infinitely worse without migration. There are voices in this chamber and around the country who claim otherwise, who see the housing crisis and the crisis in our public services as an opportunity to stir up hatred and direct it towards asylum seekers. Deputy McGrath stood in front of a rally in Rosscray protesting against accommodation for asylum seekers and warned them that Ireland was being colonised again. That is an absolutely disgusting comment and a dangerous one. Deputy McGrath should be ashamed of himself. He can stand here and proclaim all he wants, that he isn't anti-refugee, isn't anti-migrant, but your words and your actions speak for themselves, Deputy. Deputy Michael Collins, when announcing his new political party, said one of his main priorities would be capping the number of migrants entering the country. Another deputy that will be up in arms at the suggestion that he has anti-migrant views, despite very clearly pandering to an anti-immigrant vote at the expense, ultimately, at the safety of migrants and refugees. 10 arson attacks on refugee accommodation in the last 12 months. And deputies in this chamber and councillors all across the country, from Fianna Fáil, from Fine Gael, Sinn Féin, Labour, choosing to stir up anger and misinformation even further. We're at a real crisis point in public and political rhetoric around refugees and asylum seekers in Ireland, and we need to take it very, very seriously, because it's only a matter of time before people will get hurt. We need a clear plan from the government when it comes to housing asylum seekers and Ukrainians across the country. Completely lost, unfortunately, in this debate is the 600 vulnerable men seeking protection in Ireland who have been sleeping rough in sub-zero temperatures with no protection. Minister, the government's policy is a complete shambles. I don't understand it, your colleagues don't understand it, the whole country doesn't understand it. It's 2 years since Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine. 2 years, and we still don't have a medium or long-term plan. And then we see the Minister for Justice's response to this is to add 2 countries, Algeria and Botswana, to the safe country list, meaning all asylum seekers from these countries will be fast-tracked through the process in a couple of weeks. Ministers, I'm wondering, who is Algeria safe for? Because according to the Department of Foreign Affairs, it clearly isn't safe for Irish citizens. The website, the Foreign Affairs website, warns against non-essential travel due to the risk of terrorist attacks in certain areas there. And Algeria isn't safe for LGBT people either. Homosexuality is illegal there, and it is subject to 3 years imprisonment. Is this all that the government can come up with to put those countries on the fast-track list? This is absolutely ridiculous. Where are the 6 reception centres? Where are the 700 modular homes? Where is the plan for combating misinformation and engaging proactively with communities? These measures are essential to ensuring asylum seekers are integrated into their new communities safely. We can't continue to allow scenes of traumatised children being ushered through angry, racist mobs to reach safety in accommodation services. The chaotic, reactive approach from government has only fuelled these problems and has played into the hands of the far right. Several facilities earmarked for accommodation have been abandoned by the government, or you've changed the plan for who will be accommodated there due to local opposition. By bowing to that pressure, the government is emboldening the protests and the completely unfounded conspiracy that asylum seekers are somehow dangerous. A centre in Ringsend for homeless accommodation was burnt out on the unfounded suspicion that it would be housing asylum seekers. An incredibly dangerous atmosphere is building, and it needs to be de-escalated before people get hurt. And having a smooth, functional process for new arrivals and a plan for the future of the asylum system is essential in calming those tensions. The rise in number of asylum seekers over the last number of years is often phrased as a crisis, and I don't think that that's helpful, because the reality is that there will always be wars, displacement, not to mention climate change. There will always be people fleeing persecution, people seeking a better life. And as an economically successful and safe country, Ireland will be an attractive destination. This narrative being put around that Ireland is full, that we should cap migration, put a stop to accepting asylum seekers, is completely false. Ireland is not full, nowhere close to it. We haven't even reached the population that we had pre-famine. We have the means to accommodate our own population and new arrivals. We just need the public policy and the political will to provide infrastructure and services that are required to do that. Our health service is an excellent example of the priceless contributions that migrants make to Ireland, with 1/3 of registered nurses and midwives identifying as non-Irish from over 117 countries. I think in Temple Street Children's Hospital, there's over 100 nationalities of staff working there. Despite what some say, the number of asylum seekers is relatively low. With 13,600 in 2023, we are still below the EU average. Ireland should be able to handle this number. Of course, the war in Ukraine put pressure on the system, but it has reached this point now because the system was creaking at the seams from the get-go. In November 1999, direct provision was introduced by Fianna Fáil, and it has been a stain on our country ever since. A continuation of Ireland's brutal history of institutionalisation. Under the original plan, 4,000 permanent spaces were to be constructed by the state quickly. 24 years later, and they're still nowhere to be seen. Instead, we have 24 years of an inhumane, degrading system, run for profit by private entities that exploited and mistreated asylum seekers at every step of the way. A system that kept asylum seekers trapped in remote centres like Mosney, excluded from communities, excluded from the workforce, and excluded from independence. Successive governments since 1999 have stood by and allowed the system to continue. Some of them commissioned reports, made a few tweaks around the edges, but none addressed the fundamental problem with the direct provision system. It's a private, short-term system for what needs to be a permanent public service. The government made a strong commitment in the programme to government to end direct provision and replace it with a not-for-profit, humane system, and I genuinely fully believe that the Minister's personal commitment and belief in that is genuine. We all understood why that couldn't happen when there was external factors like the war in Ukraine. Everybody understood that. But there are steps that should have been taken since then. We're waiting for the Minister's revised paper on ending direct provision, which I understand will be presented in a number of weeks. But at that time, when we accepted that the Minister wouldn't be able to, like he wanted to, end direct provision, Catherine Day published yet another report saying that we needed those 6 reception centres. 2 years later, none of those reception centres are here. The continued reliance on hotel and B&B accommodation is incredibly expensive and detrimental to towns that rely on them, not just for tourism, but for when there's a hotel in an area, it could be the area for christenings, for funerals, for weddings, for all of those things. Minister, finally, everyone has a right to protest, and not everyone who finds themselves in opposition to housing asylum seekers is far right. Many have serious concerns about the pressures and limited local services, but I would appeal to people who feel these concerns with regard to services to think carefully about where they choose to direct that anger, about where they choose to protest, and about who they stand beside at rallies and at demonstrations. Don't allow your complaints about the government to be conflated with anger towards innocent migrants and asylum seekers. If you find yourself feeling sympathetic to some of the voices who are trying to tell you that somehow migrants are dangerous, don't believe them. Government have a responsibility to address concerns about services to communicate with communities and to take a holistic approach to housing asylum seekers. People don't just need roofs over their head, they need school places, GPs, psychologists, and public transport. We need a coherent plan from the government on the issue, and we need it quickly.